And I think this is so fundamental that this is the basis of the cultural, political, what have you, crisis that we're suffering today. That this monistic spirit, um, even more so than what you said before, kind of like, there's a primacy of passions, or passion is not used as a means, it's used as an ends, which is okay also, but it's not moderately sought. It's sought for end as itself, and it's in a disordered, right, inordinate manner, which in the end becomes, right, uh, unpleasurable, right? It's not pleasurable at all in the end. um, but I think it's more than that, in the sense that the body, like, we need, there's and every time there's a, a human need for redemption, right? There's a human need, and that's why, Christianity is, well, man has a natural desire for religion, in a sense, as a redemption, revelation from God. Man needs to be redeemed. So, if he doesn't believe in true religion, I would say it's Catholicism, then he would make one up, because we have a desire for revelation, redemption in particular. So, it, because the body has totally absorbed the soul, in philosophy, the body has become the redemption, right? The body has become the redeeming factor, we can say. So, I want to read something from Foucault, which I thought was interesting. I think it's from his Genealogy of Power, might be from his Archaeology of Knowledge. I'm not sure, but Foucault again kind of had this spirit where he refers everything to the body, right? He believed that any original and continuous reconstruction process of our culture has to begin with the body, or is at least related to the body and the flesh, the body and the flesh, right? That's what we're talking about, the flesh. And he says this specifically. So he says here, quote, "The flesh and all the things embedding into it, including food, climates, and earth, is where the source is. Just as the body generates desires, weaknesses, and faults, all the events in the past are also linked in the flesh and sometimes jostle against one another in the flesh. They would also dissolve, fight, and vanish with each other and pursue the insurmountable conflicts. Therefore, genealogy, as a stream analysis, is in the link between the body and history." So this, end quote. So this historical interpretation, right, this giving meaning to history as primarily a manifestation of bodily desires. There's a lot of truth to that, right? We do have wars, we do have, all these other, these turmoils, and a lot of things, things that happen throughout history, bad things, because of disordered, right, evil, we would say, human passions. Yes. So there's a lot of truth to that. But as we said this, as we talked about this before, because all the functions of man originate in the body, there is no room for any mentalism, we can say, Cartesian mentalism. There's no room to um, apply a certain function of man to the soul. So this is a logical consequence of the complex materialism, which we're talking about in postmodernism. So it's interesting to say that since the body, really, history is interpreted as really a history of a body, right? History of bodies, right? What they've been doing and how they've been responding. The salvation has to be in the body, right? In the flesh. The salvation in the body, and is in the fulfillment of the body, as we were saying before, absolutizing its desires, and as a redeeming factor, we can say, as something that will redeem me. So I need to go away from the rigid Puritanism of of the past, especially medieval times, and even in modern times, with all this talk about virtue and dualism. And I need to focus on um, a monistic view where the body is what I am, the body is what saves me, and the body is how I am fulfilled ultimately, right? How do I serve my purpose? And more concretely, in fulfilling its desires. So Yeah, it's really interesting how I guess the question would be asked, well, then why wasn't if the history is seen, if history is seen in a negative sense, right, as a bunch of bodies together, right, how can salvation be through the body, right? And then Foucault more than likely would say, um, if that question were posed to him, that really the body has kind of been suppressed, right? The body has been suppressed, and a lot of these, right, contemporary philosophers will point to um, religion, right? Anything, actually dualism also. Dualism giving primacy to the soul, especially as the evil, as the main factor of evil that has called it. So it's been, yes, there's only bodies, but because we haven't believed in that, because we were dualistic, and we put the body in a subcategory, right, under the soul, that has brought out the evils in the past. But now we need to unleash the body, and this comes from the sexual revolution of the 60s. That's a huge cultural manifestation because culture comes from philosophy. Philosophy, definitely animates it. And so the body needs to be unleashed, and that is man's redemption, if that makes sense, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I would say one thing immediately that we could say would be that it's a big mistake to think that it is possible to philosophize without, first of all, ordering one's personal life in one's inner life. I mean, if I'm in an unregenerate inner state, then whatever comes out of my mouth and whatever I think will be some or another sleazy attempt either to justify myself or to strive for superiority or to appease my guilt or whatever the case might be. That's why, say, we're reading somebody, and we know that this is a moral monster, and it's going to be, rated if you want for educational purposes, but to hope to gain something of genuine worth from it would be asking a lot. Right? If you read the manifesto, for example, of a school shooter, you're not going to be expecting to walk away with insights that you would expect to walk away with reading a Plato or a Plotinus or somebody like that, right? Because we think with our whole self, with our whole personhood, and we can't isolate one function such as the intellect, and I can do whatever I want in my personal life, and I can be a degenerate, right? And then I'm still going to be able to think clearly and correctly, and especially on these essential themes touching upon the human condition, such as the relation of the body to the mind and all of that. And so when we hear then a person saying that, oh, I know for a fact there's nothing more to life than just the satisfaction of bodily impulses, the person is simply stating their own disability. Just like if somebody tells me, I know for a fact that there's no, um, there's only four senses, hearing, taste, touch, and smell. That doesn't disprove my vision if I'm sighted. It simply proves they don't have vision, which is not a moral thing at all. It could be fine. You're congenitally blind, but just to make a point, right? If you say that there's no colors, it doesn't mean that there's no colors. I can see that there's colors if I'm not colorblind. It means that you're colorblind. Whoever's saying that. So when somebody makes these kinds of vulgar claims that fly in the face of innumerable vast amounts of content from saintly people, from geniuses, from saintly geniuses that have striven for the higher human life, right, and have given their life for their ideals and their values. It's not even worth addressing. It's just, again, somebody says there's no such thing as love. Well, it's because for you there's no such thing as love. Any mother that has a child that is not, for the most part, knows that there is such a thing as love for a fact, right? Because it's the way I feel towards my child, the way I feel towards my spouse. So, anyhow, another point then that could be made would be that there's no use demonizing our animal substratum. It's so bad that I need to breathe and I need to eat and I need to drink and I need to use the restroom. The issue would be that we can, being Homo sapiens, we can humanize our animality and, so to say, weaponize it in a way that no other animal can. So, for example, we share many needs and impulses with chimps, right, and gorillas and other primates and many, many other species of animals. A chimp, you take the banana from the chimp, the chimp probably is going to know that you took my banana. But the chimp cannot, out of revenge, launch a big war. They do fight a little bit, but they can't launch a nuclear war. They're not smart enough to have weapons. A chimp out of greed cannot structure its whole life around greed, right? In a way that we can. And for example, try to build a huge empire, the cartel empire, this and that, right? So we can weaponize, we can humanize our animality, and that's where the danger comes from. And so, for example, I have again objectives associated with the end of reproductive ends, no problem, right? But I take that impulse and instead of corralling it and using it appropriately within confines delineated by cognition, by my intellect, I can let that run amok, and I can be a voluptuary. I can be a super hedonist, and I can be, again, innumerable variants here, perverse variants that find their foundation in one general initial animal impulse. And I can take my general desire for food, which in moderation is obviously necessary and phenomenal. And I can, again, structure my whole life to eat. I can live to eat. Everything else is blotted out. And I simply think about where's my next meal coming from and how, not that I'm starving, but just because that's my main source of meaning in life. And the tragedy here is that, as far as it seems, the Homo sapien, the would-be human being, right? Meaning the Homo sapien that does not do that and strives for humanity and is trying to be human as much as possible, seems to have unlimited potentialities, infinite capacities for the pursuit of truth, for love, for goodness. And all of that entails self-sacrifice. It entails the control of our animality. And when we don't do that, right, and we don't live a dying life, we're constantly trying to die to self, let our lower self die, then we live a living death. We're alive, and yet we simply are here to observe our degenerate inner state, our inner death, right? Our subservience and slavery to the lower. And that's what makes it so tragic. That a bonobo, a chimp, a gorilla lives as a primate is not at all tragic. That's normal. Nothing else can be expected from the primate. There's no other potentialities. If I can't fly, that's not a tragedy because I'm not meant to fly. I can't fly. If a bird can't fly, then that's a problem. So if the chimp lives like a chimp, like an animal, no problem. But if I live like a chimp, like an animal, it is a problem. And I'm going to be there to see that it is a problem. And I'm going to experience increasing levels of distress and disturbance and anxiety and degeneration and death. Right? And that's the problem. So we can, again, take that approach of controlling or the necessities of our body in a moderate way and striving to develop an inner life that is aloof to the animal.